Oh, here we go, man. Here we go. Here we go. No time to waste. Here we go. Excited for what many people are calling the fight of the decade already. Errol Spence Jr. joined up against Bud Crawford for the undisputed welterweight championship. Excited to talk about it a whole lot. I brought my boxing expert here, Jake Gold, on to talk about it with me. Alec couldn't be here. He's out doing whatever he's doing. Don't worry about him. He'll be back shortly. But excited to talk with Jake. Thank you for tuning in as you guys do. Make sure you like, rate, subscribe, comment, all the good stuff. For appreciate all the love. And yeah, I don't want to waste no time. I'm ready to jump into it. By the time you guys are watching, this is the day of the fight. So by tonight, Jake, what can we expect in this fight of the decade? Many people are talking about with Spence and Bud Crawford here.
Man, tonight's fight, I mean, just it's worth all the hype. It's worth all the weight we've been having, right? This is not like, and we're talking about weight. We're not talking about the weight like we had for Pacquiao and Mayweather and Pacquiao, right? Where it was like, okay, we could have had this like years ago. Like, okay, as early as 2018, you could have made the fight. But now, this is, boxing. It's kind of, one of those games where it's very much about like promotional control and doing right by what makes business sense, right?
Sure.
Boxing in the UFC, right? When you look, because the UFC is not just mixed martial arts. This UFC is sport of mixed martial arts. It is the largest promotional company in terms of like, it's like it gets the lion's share of the coverage, right? Boxing, it's like you got a handful of different promoters, and essentially, Spence and Crawford is the culmination of. Since 2018, it was like, okay, these guys are on a collision course to getting to each other. It's not like this fight's not like overdue. These guys are absolutely in their primes. So
yeah,
tons of reasons to be excited for it.
Errol is 32. If this is correct. Bud is Terence Crawford is 34. They both have had a whole bunch of wins on both their records. Both standing at right around 5'8". Spence is maybe inch taller, 5'9". But yeah, definitely two guys of grand stature who are going to put on a great display for us. What should we look for most when this fight gets underway? Like, what will stand out to us between these two fighters?
Man, so I'm gonna, since obviously we were just doing a lot of basketball talk, right?
Sure.
Errol is from Texas. He's a huge basketball fan, and in the buildup of this fight, what he said was his trainer Derek James, right, who's got a stable that now includes Ryan Garcia after he just left his trainer.
Correct.
They've got Anthony Joshua. They've got Errol. They've got Frank Martin, who's a lightweight that could be involved in the very deep division, right, that we've seen is kind of like taking over boxing.
Yeah.
And they got Errol and Brian Garcia, man, and Jermell Charlo, who's the undisputed 154-pound champion. So that's like a starting five right there. And so what Errol pointed out was like Derek James is like Greg Popovich, and I'm Tim Duncan. And so what basically that is he's like, he's right. Errol Spence, when he compared himself to Tim Duncan, it was in a sense that he is as fundamentally sound as it gets. It's not like he's wowing you with like, oh, he's like a Roy Jones triple left hook, where it's about like twitchy athleticism and freakish gifts. Errol is a product of hard work, right? Great athleticism, but literally maybe the best fundamentals in the entire sport. And it's like it's not like he's even switching stances. He's a southpaw. This is what he does. He can fight. He's a killer on the inside. He can box at a distance behind his jab. Literally, you want to talk about fundamentals. That's as spot on as it gets when he talked about Tim Duncan. And what I think Terence Crawford is I think if you want to make it about a matchup between, okay, Tim Duncan, find his equivalent. Well, let's get Kevin Garnett in the picture here with Terence Crawford.
Okay.
So you got KG's a little more like a little different side to him, right?
Right.
Terence himself is not like the trash talker like KG. So it doesn't exactly work like that.
He was talking in the press conference, though. That's why. Right. That's kind of why I have Pro vs. Joe's in my tag right there. He was talking to some of them fans.
I like that.
Nice to get in the ring one time.
Yeah,
handle that. But definitely, I see what you're saying.
He's a dog, though. He'll talk. But like in this buildup, there's been nothing but respect between them two, and it's almost like you can tell they're really like, hey, the fight sells itself. We don't need to do any of this extra stuff to get pay-per-view buys. So, but Terence, going back to the KG thing,
correct.
So a lot of people when they talk about Tim Duncan in the all-time great conversation, right? What's one thing they're like, he's just boring. Like nobody says I'm going to grow up and be like Tim Duncan. Some people might want to be like KG, screaming anything is possible, all this stuff. Terence switches stances, which is incredible. You don't see that much. Like he boxes just as well as an orthodox as he does from a southpaw position. So one of the things that's tough is nobody really wants to fight Errol Spence, right? Like unless they have to, right? They're trying to become a champion, of course. Part of that being Spence is a southpaw, but Terence can be a southpaw himself, and a very good one at that. Now, stylistically, what this fight's going to come down to is like Terence is notoriously a slow starter, and Errol, like if he's so fundamentally sound and he can bank a lot of these rounds in like maybe 2-3 rounds. And if they're as 50-50 as everybody says they are, if you give Errol a 2-round, 3-round head start, then it's like it's going to be on Terence to say either he's got to find the finish, and that could be, he's got all the tools to do it, right? Both these guys are mean punchers. I think there's a little bit more of like a mean streak in the way Terence fights, and when he smells blood, he's out for the kill.
Got it.
But I think if these guys are under a lot of pressure, Errol's the type of guy that's like he's like a not like Tim Duncan or a Kawhi where you're like he's gonna remain the same the entire way, and that composure is what makes it so interesting. Where if Terence overcommits, Errol is a vicious body puncher, and I think both these guys are very capable of getting the finishes. So
this could be a knockout either way. Is what you're saying?
I tend to think that the styles that they present lead me to believe that, like, look, they're both better offensively than defense. They're so athletic that like when they're fighting opposition that's not at their level, like they're like you're not really getting to them. But what they have in common is they do have some common opponents. You have Sean Porter, who a lot of people would say that's Terence Crawford's best win at welterweight that made him go, okay, all right. Like Errol was a split decision,
right,
with Sean Porter, right? Terence knocked him out. Okay. So, but that was also the Sean Porter that after that fight, he retired and he had retirement on his mind. And that was, a couple of fights after. So Errol got Sean Porter first because again, Sean Porter was aligned on Errol's side. So, what I find really most interesting about this fight is stylistically, like, if they have too much respect for each other and this goes to a decision, who wins? That, in my mind, would be Errol Spence. Like, if both guys fight with a little bit too much respect, I think Errol's the one that, like, gets the nod because Terence, he doesn't know right away until he's in there with Spence, am I going to fight him southpaw or am I going to fight him orthodox?
Okay.
I mean, he might have an idea, right? He might switch it up, but he tends to kind of figure something out about his opponent and then go, okay, this is what I'm doing for the rest of the fight. But if he doesn't take as many chances, that's why I think it'll come down to like those early rounds. If Terence doesn't start at least, trying to use his advantages as well. Because like he's got a 2-inch reach advantage over Errol. But, we don't know if he's going to be a little gun shy to start because he's given up some rounds against some fighters before. So
I know you're aligned with the UFC and some boxing things going on here, but you get to put some money down, or for the fans, you have a suggestion for which way to lean. Which way would you lean in this fight, Spence or Crawford? Are you saying Spence as well with that?
I would say the betting favorite right now is Terence Crawford. I think he might be minus 150. I think there's
still close with that though. That's not a big number.
So it's like you're and then Errol I think is like plus 140 or something like that. Like it's so close, right? It's like
I can flip real quick for sure.
Yeah, it's like a coin flip about who you want. But if I had to lean somewhere, I would say I think Terence has more tools to win this fight, and he's rightfully the favorite. Again, I don't use my picks to make your gambling picks and then look at me like, what is this guy saying? Like,
you might have been wrong last time too. I want to call you out.
No, yeah, exactly. I was wrong on the Izzy fight.
Yeah.
So, I personally think like based off the mutual respect these guys have shown for each other, and they're selling it off, the matchup sells itself. I feel like there's like a mutual understanding. Like when these guys talked on the phone and got this deal done where they said, hey, whatever the promoters think about you could fight someone else and I could fight someone else, all I've been wanting to do is fight you, and all you've been wanting to do is fight me. So let's tell everybody involved that we're going to make this fight happen. And then in the build-up, if we're going to be respectful, well, that must mean they really feel like very confident in either our styles make for the great fight, or where they're like, hey, if we both go, Hagler Hearns style, right? Like just go absolutely bonsai, like right away from the opening bell. Whoever wins and whoever loses doesn't matter because we have a rematch clause right away, and it's going to make us even more money.
Of course.
So I truly do think like this fight's going to end in a stoppage.
Okay.
Even though if there's too much respect, which clearly these are the two best, and it's the undefeated welterweight championship. It could be if there's a case of too much respect and go to the cards, but man, that
could be slightly disappointing. We want to see them punches get thrown and don't want too much respect on the board. It seems like from press conferences, a couple interviews I've seen them do, that they understand that they're putting on a show for us, so they're going to be swinging for the fences here. So excited to see how that plays out. Then with that, as I have on our ticker down at the bottom, would you consider this the fight of the decade so far, or will this be
absolutely
the fight of the decade defined as that?
Now, sometimes we get surprised. Sometimes we get like there's some fight that happens in the UK that's like during college football where nobody's even watching, that becomes the fight of the year, or that becomes the fight of the decade, or it doesn't end up always being the matchup between the pound for pound top 5 guys, that like is the fight. But in terms of like the anticipation, no, it's not going to be on the level of Floyd and Pacquiao, because those guys, there's a little, it's a whole country behind Manny Pacquiao.
Maybe I'm hyped up into it, but it feels close. I'm not gonna lie.
It feels really close, doesn't it? Though, yeah. The pay-per-view buys won't be the same because there's this illegal streaming thing going on right now that makes it a little easy on the wallet sometimes.
Correct.
We're just speaking the facts. So
you gotta be honest here. I appreciate that.
But this to me is worth every penny of the pay-per-view, because like if fans show up with their support for a fight like this, then as we've been seeing, as has been the trend with Tank fighting Ryan, and then Caleb Plant fighting David Benavidez, it allows the promoters to stop saying, hey, Terence Crawford might be an ESPN top ranked fighter and Errol might be a PBC Showtime fighter, but there's more money for us all to be made if we just make the best fights, and then we can build off each other's profile, and then these guys can have great careers instead of just everyone's trying to protect their zero. It doesn't have to be like that anymore. So I'm super excited. To answer your question, absolutely the fight of the decade in my mind, because this is at least 5 years, I think, in the making, but not in terms of like the matchup is most ready right now, 1,000%.
And I don't want to move on too far from here, but just to throw it out there, are there any other names you would want to see together that could compete with this one as the fight? Like, you want to see Tank versus, I don't know, Haney? Would that be up there as fight of the decade, or do you think this for sure are the two biggest names?
I think this would be fight of the decade right now for sure. Yeah. But like in the future, we could be working towards, I believe, Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Davis is like this. Like, I think Shakur and Gervonta are on the collision course to be doing what exactly these guys are. Because with Devin Haney, he just announced today, or actually this is releasing on Saturday, so it would have been on Friday, that Devin's going to be moving up to 140 pounds to fight Regis Prograis. So that green belt that he's got in this picture right here, he's going to be going up to 140 pounds to fight for that green belt, the WBC belt that Regis Prograis has at 140 pounds. So what will then be the interesting thing to see what happens is at 135 pounds, if all those sanctioning bodies go, okay, Devin has clearly made his intention that he's going to compete at 140, 135, all those belts open back up. And I think the first step is, okay, who do these sanctioning bodies decide are the guys competing for these titles? And I think the WBC and the WBO, so those two belts, he's got those two belts right there, the green and the black belt.
Got it.
Those ones, I think, might be on the line together in the same fight. A vacant title fight, they go Shakur Stevenson versus Vasily Lomachenko. And you bam. Just like that, you got a champion. Whoever wins that fight's got two belts. Nice. And you get the WBA. they've got what they want to do, right? Tank fights, comes the WBA champion. IBF got that red belt over there.
Right.
They make whoever their contender is. I feel like then the natural thing is one of those guys, Shakur or whoever wins, Shakur or Loma. I would favor Shakur just because he's younger,
sure,
and more fresh. Say Shakur beats him, Tank keeps on winning. Those guys get to a collision course where if all 4 belts are on the line, I think those guys are a little bit more like they resonate a little more with the younger crowd.
They are connecting right now for sure. That'd be a good one.
Yeah, and I think it's Spence Crawford, but with guys who are like not as like, like Shakur has been sending bottles to Devin Haney's table, like sign the contract. You got Tank is like tapped in. It's like you got certain rappers that are like getting it, like, hey, get in line if you want to walk this guy out to his next fight. It's a long line. I mean, Shakur's repped by Jay Prince, so same thing with the he's obviously got his hands all over hip hop too. So I think
a lot of good options there. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm excited for how that goes. I do have to ask this though, because this has been bugging me staring at this picture this whole time. Be honest with me. Did Haney win that fight, bro, against Lomachenko?
So, I mean, I watched it when I watched it first, I thought like, okay, the acceptable scorecards to me, like kind of 115, 113. So like I think 7-5, 7 rounds, 5 rounds. Like, okay, maybe. I honestly thought it was like a draw.
Right.
At best for Haney. I thought Lomachenko won the fight. I really did. But I guess I guess 7-5 is okay, but I don't know, man. I did think that Lomachenko won the fight. But Devin did not look like he was out of place.
Okay.
That's what I would say. So I don't think it's like, I don't think it's not that's the worst thing. I do think Lomachenko deserved to win, have his hand raised that night. But again, that's why if Haney does go up and he proves he can win at 140 pounds as well, then you get, okay, well, let's make Lomachenko versus Shakur, 2 very good fighters for that belt right there. So, and then we get to a collision course where it could be like a Spence Crawford all over again. And then maybe in 3 years, we're talking about the same thing. Like, hey, we thought Spence Crawford was fight of the decade, and it might have been at that point 2-3 fights. But here we go,
Definitely good stuff there. Thank you for answering that question. Going back to where we started, because I do want to stay back on track with Spence and Crawford here. But tying it all together, it felt like there was almost, I don't want to call it a dead period in boxing. People were saying boxing was phasing out. And we now see that a lot of guys, we have the grand fights of Spence and Crawford. We got guys coming up in Haney and all these other guys that you mentioned. Can you just talk about the quick renaissance that boxing has found itself in right now with all the guys popping up across the sport?
I can name a couple of reasons why I believe it's happening. One is boxing is always at its best when the heavyweight division is going, right? Which we have a lot of great names in heavyweight boxing right now. Fortunately, they're not. They just tend to make fights a little bit slower, which is a little, But you had Wilder Fury put 3 great fights together, a great trilogy that left the fans really pleased with what was going on. Andy Ruiz had an upset over Anthony Joshua. Like there was a lot of stuff going on, and it was like, okay, once the heavyweight division is revived, and it's like, hey, check out all this other stuff we got, right?
Right.
But then also like the influencer thing, okay? Like like you got these influencers that like it's not professional boxing. Like they,
no. We discussed that last time.
Yeah, they get their names, in the pro books, but again, they're being matched accordingly. It's not like they're fighting world beaters. It's they got a license to box professionally to fight someone of a very similar status. But when these fights are being talked about more, I think it made some of the top guys at the top go like, well, what are we doing here? We're the guys that are supposed to be bringing the eyeballs to the sport. So I think they're like, okay, let's take this stuff back in our direction. And there are 2 separate things, but I think what we're really seeing now is even this fight, right? Like Paul and Diaz, which will be next weekend, which is crazy too, right? People are going to want to watch that fight too, but I think like no one, like it's a muted discussion about that right now. Cause like the week before is the biggest fight of the decade.
Correct.
So, Hey, man, it's really about like guys like Spence and Crawford going, hey, forget who's your promoter. Forget who my promoter is. It's on us if we want to make this fight. I can tell, like, because Spence hasn't fought in 17 months. Because after he beat Ugas, which was his last win, they're like, who do you want to fight next? And it's like they could have made him. His promoters could have made him fight Keith Thurman. They could have made him fight Jaron Ennis. Any of those guys that were affiliated with his promotional stable, right? PBC, the guys who fight primarily on Showtime or on Fox Sports. And he's like, Terence's words were, y'all know who I want next. I want Terence Crawford, period. Like, basically, that's what he was saying, was like, I don't want nobody else. And then Terence, after, his last win, he's like, y'all know who I want. It's no secret. So they got on the phone. They made this happen. I commend both of them. And this is why I'm like so stoked for the fight. I mean, it's a great weekend for fights in general.
Absolutely. Much appreciated. Excited for that. And then to your point, let me see if I can find this real quick as you sent it to me. There also just the undercard for that fight. We'll start there. Can you just talk about what else is going on that day?
Man, look,
and then we'll go UFC.
Yeah, I mean, look, for a fight like this, right? The main event is the reason this is going to have $20+ million in ticket sales is because of Spence and Crawford. The reason it's going to have however many pay-per-view buys it gets and illegal views from streaming.
Also, quick note: you screenshot this, sent this to me right before the episode. You talked about Crawford being 150. Spence is now down to or up to plus 125. So that line is shifting, as you pointed out, as time goes by. So
it's going to always fluctuate. So that's the thing with these guys, and it's awesome. So looking at that undercard, though, you got Isaac Cruz and Giovanni Cabrera. Giovanni Cabrera is an undefeated fighter, trained by Freddie Roach, longtime trainer of Manny Pacquiao, many other Hall of Fame boxers before him. That's a WBA lightweight title eliminator. And as you know, right now, lightweight champion is Devin Haney, but he's going up to 140. And then Cruz wins that fight. Then all of a sudden it's okay. If Haney's at 140 and the WBA says we need to move on, next thing you know, if Cruz wins in a dominant fashion on a big card like this, it might be like, all right, run it back, Tank versus Isaac Cruz, and boom, there's your next fight right there. So that is a fight right there, is a co-main, pretty solid. And then a Hall of Famer, Nonito Donaire, trying to become a champion again. His last loss that he had was Naoya Inoue, who was on Tuesday night or Tuesday morning for us, Tuesday night in Japan. Just absolutely detonated Stephen Fulton Jr. And became champion. So that's a guy that, like, Nonito Donaire losing to Inoue, not at all a slouch on his record. Like, you lost to an all-time great, and Nonito Donaire is one of the greats himself. He's probably the second best Filipino boxer ever behind Manny Pacquiao, and he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer when his time is done. So, I mean, for a boxing undercard, again, like, they're not always great when the main event is a gargantuan, but we have the third fight. It's a vacant title fight, and that's between a future Hall of Famer and a guy who, as the underdog, is not that much of an underdog. Like, come on now, like this is like people say, the boxing card, it's all about the main event. Like, no. I see a guy that could be fighting Tank next if he wins. Right. And I see a Hall of Famer fighting for a title again at 40 years old.
Yeah. Like, I'll be tuned in.
Yeah, I'm tuned in. And then junior middleweight Sergio Garcia. I mean, Yoenis Tellez. That's for the fourth fight, man. It's can't get much better than that. So I'm excited. And if you can get to like a Buffalo Wild Wings or somewhere or if you have two screens and there's a way for you to watch the UFC card too, look, man, you're not gonna be disappointed with that card either. Even though they did have.
Go ahead and talk to me about that real quick, because I even realized that was going on the same day. UFC 291 is underway. We got Poirier versus Gaethje. You got two going down, as well as a few other fights that you said definitely want to tune into. So, yeah, excited for that one as well. I'm glad that we're getting so much going on. I'll figure out the dual screen. I got people coming over. Definitely going to be tuned in for it, excited for it. And sometimes it's going on with UFC also.
Sometimes it's a little stressful, man, when it's multiple fights in the same night, but it almost makes it like more fun. We're like, oh my gosh, like we're all about the fights tonight, Right. And so what I try to tell boxing fans who are like want to crap on the UFC sometimes is okay, you don't like Poirier Gaethje, you want to try to downgrade this event to elevate yours? Like, let me say,
real quick. Sorry, that's a thing. There's a boxing versus UFC thing amongst fans.
It's not my thing. Not my thing. I just enjoy good fights, but there are some. Yeah, exactly. Like that's my thing. Is like if it's good fights on, I'm in. So, like there are some boxing fans will be like, "Oh, Poirier Gaethje, who cares? It's a rematch." I mean, Poirier Gaethje to me is like, in a boxing fan's perspective. To put it in boxing fans' perspective, I would say it's like Gotti and Ward. And that's a great rivalry. It's a great trilogy, and this could be a trilogy. And for UFC fans, if you're like, oh, this boxing event, who cares about it? Okay, well, let's just call it the biggest fight that could be made in boxing right now. And if you were to say the biggest fight that could be made in MMA, it would be John Jones and Francis Ngannou. So we're talking about the biggest fight. So both fans need to understand that this is a awesome night for both sports. And anybody who wants to be, oh, this, well, sorry, I'm going to try to enjoy them all. So
for sure.
Yeah. Poirier Gaethje, absolute carnage, just total war to be expected. I mean, the odds are basically the same, -150 plus 125. That looks reflective of Spence Crawford.
Right.
It's not be for a title, be for the BMF title.
Right.
Those guys are two badasses, no matter who wins that. I don't need a BMF title to tell me that they're badasses. But and then Alex Pereira coming off his loss to Izzy that I said wouldn't happen. So I don't know everything. I definitely him fighting Jan Blachowicz, who Israel Adesanya lost to, going up to light heavyweight. This is Alex Pereira's light heavyweight debut. So to be making a debut at 205 pounds in the UFC against a former champion in Jan Blachowicz, if he wins, this UFC light heavyweight division just saw its champion in Jamal Hill relinquish his belt from having popped his Achilles in the UFC fighter basketball game, believe it or not.
Wow.
Which is great. It's been just ever since John Jones left that division, it's been like someone's won the title, like Yuri Prochazka, then he rips his shoulder apart. Then they try to make a vacant title fight, and it ends in a draw. And then so they go Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill wins. Then he tears his Achilles. So it's just like a cursed division right now.
Yeah,
maybe Pereira gets in there. If he can do what Izzy couldn't, and beat Jan Blachowicz. And if you look at Pereira, like this guy was the amount of weight he was cutting down to make 185 pounds was insane. Right. This is closer to the Pereira who he wants to be. Okay. So if he wins, he's a scarier 205 pounder, even though his ground game isn't as good as Izzy's is, because he hasn't been in martial arts as long. He's been more of a kickboxer. So Blachowicz was able to hold Izzy down on the ground and make it. It was like, okay, there's weight classes exist for a reason. So if Blachowicz is maybe a little stubborn or just gets caught standing up, it might be a problem for him. And then next thing you know, Pereira is fighting for the light heavyweight title. And if Izzy runs out of, he's beating everybody at middleweight. If all of a sudden Pereira, is in a position to compete for the title, and then he wins, and then boom, trilogy, Izzy versus Pereira at a different division, at a different weight class that Pereira is maybe even scarier at.
Okay.
I mean, come on, dollar signs for everybody. So
love that.
Those two fights right there are what you want to watch. Derek Lewis just got moved in the main event. There's a fight that got removed. Derek Lewis, I mean, he's always exciting. His cardio is not that great. But
understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
Tony Ferguson's on a 5 straight fights in a row. Bobby Green, though, exciting. Like this was good matchmaking between these two. Like two veterans who both like are true OGs of the sport. And then Michael Chiesa and Kevin Holland too. Michael Chiesa, looking to get back from his injury, get back in there. And then Kevin Holland literally will take any fight on however short notice, doesn't matter. I like those two matchups. They're good for where they're placed. So there's no title fights on this card.
But a good group.
But it's good matchmaking, right? Like you see, like this is good matchmaking. So again, I'm gonna try to be watching as many of these as I can.
Definitely.
So a lot to be excited about there.
Very cool. Thank you for the rundown on that. I'll find a way to get the dual screens up for everybody, and excited to see how that plays out. And yeah, just excited for this great night of fights across the board, with this being the lead of it all. So
of course.
Thank you for the breakdown on that. Any other comment across the board about any of that? Just about what's going on this Saturday night.
Man, what I could say is just, when people talk in the past about some of the great fights that happen and like why doesn't anything happen anymore? Like, no, it's happening right now. Spence and Crawford is that. And don't just be like, oh, everything was better back then. I think we kind of fall victim to that across conversation. Hip hop, I think we fall into with other sports, the
golden era is
the golden era.
Ruins a lot of the future.
It's like we might be in one right now. Like we just saw Gervonta and Ryan Garcia sell 1.2 million pay-per-views. And that's in the era of illegal streaming. Like that's a fight that, like, if you put that back then when there is no, I'm not going to say the name of the sites.
But those
guys, who knows what they're doing? But they're doing $20+ million in ticket sales, and they're generating buzz across social media. And more importantly, they're keeping us, the fans, entertained, and we're putting money into their pockets. So I think it's a win-win across the board, and just enjoy wherever you're at when you're watching this, because we don't get to see this much.
Got it. I guess I'll throw this out, and hopefully I'm not snitching, but to the point about those guys that you mentioned, there's obviously a grand awareness of them by boxing and by UFC. Are they trying to shut that down, or are they okay actually with those guys existing? It's still giving them eyes on the sport.
I mean, I don't think they'll ever be truly okay with it.
Never publicly, but behind the scenes, thanks for the views. You're still giving us eyes on the sport one way or another.
Right, because here's the thing: is they still know when they go on Google Trends and they see how well people are doing when they're getting searches.
Right.
Those are being included. I mean, where it's money out of their pockets of, like, they're not getting an extra $84.99 or $75, whatever the price is of every pay-per-view that has these streams, right? They might not be getting that there, but they might not watch if not for it too. And if they have an awareness of it and they're following them on social media, I'm not trying to like say like whether it's the thing to do, right, the right thing to do or wrong thing to do, but
it's what I'm saying, good, but it helps in a way.
What they're doing though is like these boxers primarily, because the UFC guys don't have that for them, but the boxers, they have, like, their trunks might have, so they have OnlyFans on their trunks, and if they have X amount of followers or whatever, or they've got this amount of interest in them, and they run their data on Google, like they can negotiate a higher split, So I think all that matters is like how many people are, like, not all that matters, but like when it comes to negotiating some of these other deals, like maybe streaming is inviting more viewers to know who these people are than if it didn't exist at all. So it's like a nuanced take, and it's not. It's not. I know. I'm sorry if it's not controversial enough. But
no, you're totally fine. I get what you're saying, and some people may use that, but I definitely put some money down for these fights, and we'll be tuned in, probably support all that's going on this weekend. So again, just good stuff all across the board here. Thank you again for all the breakdown, the analysis on all of that. Looking forward to all that's going on this weekend and beyond, as you explained. More fights on the way. So good stuff here. We'll have you back again next week talking about MLB and things. Watch other episode we just did today, doing all the NBA grids and all of that. Good stuff everywhere we here on the show here, and with Jake joining us. Thank you, bro, as always. And we'll get out of here, man. Thank you, man.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
So that'll be it. Thank y'all for tuning in, as you guys do. As we always say, like, review, subscribe, comment. Show love however you do, and be sure to show love back to you. Thank y'all for tuning in again to this one. Enjoy the fight tonight. You guys are tuned in, and we'll see you guys again real soon, man. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, man. Peace.